Paul. That was very kind. Thank you to the Utah Golf Association, Executive Director Jake Miller, the UGA Board, the Hall of Fame Selection Committee. I'd also like to thank all those former executive directors of the Utah Golf Association, upon whose shoulders the UGA was built. And I'd like to thank Devin DeLynn and the Utah section of the PGA, of which I'm a proud member. Congratulations to all my fellow 2020 or 2021, whatever you want to call it, Hall of Fame inductees. I'm humbled and honored to be named with you. While reviewing the Hall of Fame, I realized that I've been fortunate to know 28 different members that are currently members of our Hall of Fame. All of them gave back to golf, and I strive to emulate that same quality. I've been blessed with great golf friends, including many here in person and in spirit, who have positively influenced me. Thank you for being part of my village. Escorting me tonight are my amazing husband, Steve, our daughter Stina and her husband Jeffrey, our daughter Katie and her husband Jared, our daughter Kimberly and her husband Tyler, and the amazing grandson Porter, who you hear in the outskirts of the building. I love his little voice. Summing up 43 years of competitive golf is difficult. My dad, Pete Billek, was a professional baseball player prior to the World War II draft. The Newport News team dedicated his last game, the last game he played to my dad, Pete. In that game, he hit 2 home runs. At the end of the war, his window for professional golf or professional baseball had passed. I always wanted to be like my dad. Have we heard that a lot tonight? I always wanted to be like my dad and make him proud. In honor of my dad, I always registered as Sue Billek Nyhus when I entered a USGA championship. As a child and a youth, I played every sport with a ball with the neighborhood kids, from sunup to sundown. One day, a teacher at our high school asked my brother Joe if he knew of any girls that could or would play golf. Dunedin High School was starting a girls' golf team, and they needed one more player to field the team. My brother Joe, yeah, my sister will play. That's how this all started. I was 15. I remember being super nervous before the first match. Joe came up and talked to me, and he said, "Lay up on that 6th hole, the par 3. That big bunker gets in the way." So I hit my wedge down in front of the bunker, chipped over the bunker, made my 4, finished with a 52, and I was hooked on golf. I got a part-time job at a club repair shop with a lighted range. I picked, cleaned, and sold range balls in exchange for 1 lesson a week and all the range balls I could hit. I played high school golf, and then I joined the Greater Tampa Junior Golf Association. I played in the very first American Junior Golf Association event that was located in my home county. And I didn't realize it was the original AJGA that we know of today until probably 2010. I got the big break in 1979. I was awarded a scholarship to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes golf camp at Pine Needles in North Carolina. I learned a lot about golf, and I learned a lot about Jesus Christ. It was life-changing. Exactly 40 years later, I was back at Pine Needles, completing my own personal Grand Slam. Coincidence? I think not. The dash between 1979 and 2019 was filled with some amazing experiences that helped build wonderful relationships with friends from all over the world. Private housing was available for almost all of the events. If it had not been that way, I could not have played golf. In those private housing experiences, I made some of the most amazing friends and learned some of the most valuable golf lessons. And right here, I'd like to recognize a host family who hosted me in Milton Keynes, England. Terry and Gladys Devine, would you stand, please? British Open several years in a row. And not only did they host, they gave up their own bedroom and went downstairs and slept on the couch and gave us the bed. I was just stunned. They're dear friends for us still today. Golf brought me to BYU in 1981, and my Utah golf family became very near and dear to me. Joyce Billings befriended me immediately in my first summer in Utah. Near the end of my time at BYU, Bob and Jane Bentley took me under their wing. Bob became my swing coach. After our first two daughters were born, Joyce contacted me and urged me to regain my amateur status. She begged. She wanted me to play with her in the brand new USGA state team tournament. Because of Joyce, the personal Grand Slam was made possible. We played many events together over the years, winning a lot. A week before Joyce passed away, the two of us played in the Nibley two-woman scramble. And Joycey left this world a winner in her final golf event. Former executive director of the UGA, Joe Watts, was also so encouraging to me. He started the Utah-Arizona shootout with help, but he was the mover and shaker, and it included 2 women on the team, 2 seniors, and 8 men. Oh, what fun we had competing for each other and for our state. Coach Jeff Smith at Weber State was my #1 sounding board and dearest coaching friend. I'm also so grateful for all my local media friends who spent time paying attention to women's golf. So many great friends. Thank you. My Heavenly Father used golf to get me to BYU. I knew I needed to improve my golf, so I signed up for every tournament I could find, including USGA events. Ladies on the team, did you hear that? Just checking. To make it all happen, I utilized that private housing offered by members of clubs. In 1983, I qualified for the USGA Public Links in Miami. I played in the North and South at Pinehurst and qualified for the USGA Women's Open at nearby Southern Pines. The one thing I remember about that Open qualifying was that I missed a very short putt on the first hole for par, and I told myself, oh, bogeys on the first hole might be lucky. The Women's Open that year was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was staying in private housing. This was a much bigger stage than I had ever seen before. While reading the names on the locker room, in the locker room, on the lockers, I turned a corner and walked straight into Big Mama, Joanne Carter. I found my game with 4 holes to play in the tournament, got some cheers from the crowd before leaving Oklahoma with 2 sprained wrists from spending too much time in the US Open rough. In 1995, Steve and I had Stina and Kim. We're both teaching school, and we had some free time in the summers. And so Joyce and I represented Utah in that first state team tournament in Orlando. My parents made the rare trip to come watch the competition. We had so much fun with the Utah men's and women's team. Joyce knew everyone. Steve was the ultimate support to make this all possible for me to compete, especially when I traveled away from home. In the years to come, he began playing more and even teamed up with me in a few mixed team events. One of my favorite was with Alan and Susan Simpkins down at Sky Mountain. In 1997, at almost 8 months pregnant with Katie, Joyce and I headed out of town to Arizona to play in the USGA State Team Tournament. Captain Jeannie Goddard, also inducted tonight, kept bringing me iced towels because the temperatures were over 100 degrees and she was worried I was going to go into labor while I played. I shot 68 in the final round, turning the baby to the target. Utah finished 10th that year, and I think that might have been our best finish. Our children grew. I started coaching at BYU. Time was limited, but 1999 was an especially good year. As a BYU assistant coach, I was assigned the task of creating the itinerary for the first international trip that they took. I contacted all those host families I stayed with while I played the European tour, including Gladys and Terry. Oh, I almost knocked over the light. We ended up having a great trip. We played golf almost every day for 10 days. That practice set up the winning summer of 1999. Sometime around 2010, I realized the USGA streak, or what I called my own personal Grand Slam, was a possibility. At that time, just the senior am remained, but I was too young. For 3 years, I thought about an 18-hole qualifying. I was also working hard to recover from the worst decade of my life. Competitive golf was the only way I could create enough specific focus to block out the trauma that distracted me day and night. I dare say competitive golf saved my life in those years. I looked forward to my 50th birthday, but a lot of pressure had built up to achieve that final piece of my personal Grand Slam. In the qualifying, which happened to be at Jeremy Ranch, which we've spoken of tonight, I started out rough and I was struggling. I got onto the 5th hole, the downhill par 4. Go ahead and think about that for a second. I anxiously looked up a little too early on the approach shot and shanked it into the right oak brush. Yeah. I dropped the provisional ball, I took a couple of deep breaths, I almost holed the next shot, and I went on to qualify for the senior am that year. Keith Hansen was there at the scoring table that day and was the first to congratulate me on that accomplishment. The USGA announced some changes. They were discontinuing the public links in the state team tournament. Overwhelming for me was the addition of the USGA 4-ball and some additional future date for the USGA Senior Women's Open, so the anxiety for those 18-hole qualifying started all over again. My personal Grand Slam grew by 2. I asked my toughest competitor at the time, Annette Giotti, to be my partner in the 4-ball, and we went to Tucson to qualify. It was an unusually rainy day in Tucson, Arizona. The kind of day where the mud sticks to the soles of your shoes and you get taller as you play. In those qualifyings, there's always a one-key hole or one-key shot that makes it or breaks it for you. Ours came on hole 10. Both of us were in trouble. I had to stand on a rock that was about a foot off of the ground to hit a pitch shot out of a penalty area. I couldn't have hit a better shot, and I made the 10-footer for par. Annette and I finished the round strong and qualified to play in the first USGA Women's 4-ball held at Bandon Dunes that year. Now the pressure built for the new USGA Senior Women's Open. I tried the first year they hosted the event, and I didn't make it. Another 365 days of thinking about 18 holes until I arrived in the suburbs of Denver. There was a winter storm warning. It was cold and it was windy. My wet towel froze solid before I got to the 2nd hole. The course was set up for a warm May day with forced carries into most greens over lakes. I had to hit so much extra club that the ball could not hold on the greens. So I identified the best place to chip back from behind the green, and I hit it there all day long. Patience with the conditions also made me one of the toughest competitors on the course that day. I was exhausted, cold, but so relieved to have qualified for the final event in my personal Grand Slam. I drove up and over I-70 in a blizzard, grateful for my big red truck. I stayed the night in Grand Junction with Mike and Mikkel Jersa. It wasn't until the next day that I read the paperwork for the championship. I didn't know where the championship was. I just wanted to qualify. I was heading back to Pine Needles, North Carolina. 1979 to 2019, and now you know the rest of the story. In 1999, when I was a finalist in the USGA Public Links, at the prize giving on the 18th green, just after losing the hole to lose the match 1-up, I was asked to say a few words before they presented the giant trophy to my opponent. And there's no trophy for runner-up in USGA events, just saying. I'm going to leave you with the same sentiment, just a bit updated. My most prized and precious trophies escorted me here tonight. Steve, Stina, and Jeffrey, Katie and Jared, Kimberly, Tyler, Porter, and Porter's little sister coming in January. It's these relationships that bring the most joy. Thank you all for being a part of my golf village and my village for life, and for considering me for this great honor. Thank you.